Welcome to Building Together, Bloomfield Township's involvement with Oakland Hills Country Club and the fire that occurred there a couple of years ago. My name's Leo Savoie. I'm the former supervisor here of Bloomfield Township, and today I have Patti Voelker, the director of our Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department, along with Andrea Bibby, the deputy director. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So you had to be watching what was going on the day of the fire. I know you sent your people over there, the inspectors, heating and cooling, all to be involved with it.
Right.
But tell me, what was going through your mind? Because you realized, or you had to realize almost immediately, that the rebuilding of this was going to start right with you guys from ground zero.
Well, immediately it was obviously the tragedy of what was happening, and then not knowing really what the extent of the damage was going to be. At that point, whether it be rebuilding or was it going to be reconstruction, or maybe there was partial saving of the structure. So we really didn't know really what the extent was going to be. But then immediately, as you said, it was working with the fire department to the level that they were needing, that expertise because of just what you're referring to. But then also knowing that this is an active golf course and this is an active country club, and then how else are we going to be then involved in the immediate day-to-day and then the future.
And I have to say, based on our experience, I mean, originally when the fire occurred, the first reaction was kind of shock, because obviously Oakland Hills being such a beautiful piece of Bloomfield Township. Iconic, if you will. I was looking for that perfect word. Thank you, Leo. And that was the first thing, was the original shock. And I think for anybody that day was the hope that maybe, as Patti had mentioned, some of it would be able to be saved. So I think within the moment, it was kind of the shock, and then everybody responding. And then, of course, within our department being planning, building, and ordinance, we're kind of dealing with involvement on all sorts of levels, from the immediate, having to have our building inspectors out there on scene, to then thinking about what does the future look like to keep it safe, to keep it operational. And then obviously in the planning division portion, thinking about what is the future going to bring and the future development of the country club. So we've really been able to be involved in kind of all levels and continue to be involved at all levels. And we've come a long way. No,
you really have. That fencing went up almost immediately within the first 12 hours. But what most people don't realize is that fire burned for over 24 hours. And again, as you said, the inspectors were out there securing it, and you alluded to the fact that the country club is still an ongoing operation. Mm-hmm. So you have pool, you have tennis, you have golf course, and within all of that, you have safety. Mm-hmm. And then safety is paramount in everything that goes on there. But then we had to start saying, okay, what's our first steps? And I remember the first steps. You called and you said, we need to start setting up meetings with the architects, with whoever the builders are going to be selected, and we need to sit down and talk with them ahead of time and get their thoughts and the timing on there, as well as the engineers, the civil engineers and all of that you deal with all the time.
I think we were even working with you and the group from Oakland Hills almost on a weekly basis, if not more, because there was also the request for, do you have any old plans? What type of plans does the township have on former projects that could be utilized to gain some historical perspective of what the new clubhouse will look like? So there was researching our archives, trying to see what can we resurrect that would be beneficial to your architectural team. But you're absolutely right. We did meet so often, and it needed that communication, not really understanding what was the scope of the project. It wasn't just Oakland Hills. We soon found out Oakland Hills wanted to expand that a little bit further and take advantage of the
construction site.
Yeah, to then look at, well, what about the maintenance?
The Green and Grounds building.
Yes,
yep.
Right.
I have to say, within a week of probably of the fire occurring, we had sat down with representatives from Oakland Hills. And I think, Leo, actually you were in that meeting. And it was pretty much all hands on deck at that moment. Mm-hmm. And I think the partnership has been very successful from that very first meeting in understanding both what is needed by the township in terms of to ensure everything is safe and secure. But in addition to that, as part of the membership, thinking about how you can still utilize what remains. So we also worked through some strategies in the very beginning in terms of whether it was installing tents and being able to provide some food service to your members. Those are all factors that we all had to consider at that time to at least be able to get you to be able to utilize what you had there. So that was also another project that we had to basically get into immediately, was setting all that up.
And what a lot of people didn't realize internally is that when you have a 3,000 square foot tent and when you have temporary kitchen facilities and temporary cleaning facilities, they all have to be inspected.
That's
and
correct.
they all have to be connected to the sanitary systems. It just doesn't go up overnight. You could have 150 people in that building, and you don't want to collapse. We've seen what can happen in other areas when.
Oh, sure. Well, anchoring. So you have, anchorage, which is really important because of, we're talking about tents, but also then where you're placing those, and much of it has to do with where underground utilities. So there's a lot of information that we're gathering both from our engineering division as well as, the plans that are being submitted to us. But again, it's always the public health, safety, and welfare that we are really charged with. But we were able to look at interim plans that were presented, and I think there was even, if there wasn't a wedding reception or there was some major party that was coming up and wanting to have these tent structures, then physically looking at, well, then how can we have access to the site, access to these temporary structures in a safe way that is manageable and also meeting the needs of your membership. So I think that worked well.
I agree. We did. It allowed them to be able to still participate and be active members while we had to look at the grander picture and think of all of the things that still had to occur looking forward. And we're still in that today through the construction phase. But it's been quite a process. And I think that we have turned around a lot of effort within a matter of maybe 7 or 8 months from the time that the fire occurred to the point where we were able to get this project approved and looking forward. So that took a lot of effort on both the team as well as the department staff. So I give a lot of credit to those people who've been involved.
You'll have you had the neighborhood associations there, both on the north side and the south side, and meeting with them and then saying, okay, what's our first meeting here? And it was the design and review board. Once we got through the internal meetings, and then we had to start meeting with the township officials there.
Well, I give a lot of credit to the architectural team that was put together by Oakland Hills, because you had a project coordinator, you had your architects team, and then all their experts putting that data together, because it then had to become a public review process, no different than any other public process. But also we wanted to make sure that it was very thorough. So there was a lot of internal reviews, but then once the public meeting phase of the review process started, we wanted to make sure we had all the information possible. And that submission was turned around so quickly, and that was the first public presentation of the project at the Design Review Board. Ultimately then passing on to the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and ultimately the Township Board. But it was because we had to go through that very standard, typical review process that can take up to 60, 90 days. And in this instance, probably took a little bit closer to 90 days.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, our engineering team, PEA, who you're quite familiar with, working with Hubble, Roth, and Clark internally there, and coordinating everything. But at the end of the day, this is not the biggest project that the building department has been involved with. You handle all of the schools here for the Bloomfield Hills School District. Yes. You handle all of the large buildings here. So it's not like that you came into this unprepared.
No, and I think the fact that it was some sensitivity to it, and I think as you said, the emotion, but there was. I mean, this is one of the premier features of Bloomfield Township is the Oakland Hills Country Club, and so knowing that had a lot of eyes on it, we wanted to make sure that we were as thorough as possible and making sure that we had all the material and information necessary at our meetings. And I think there was a lot of public support in that way because they could readily see what the drawings, what it was going to look like, the before and after, and so forth.
And I think also the reception from the public was very well in the fact that, Oakland Hills really wanted to kind of remain with the same appearance, architectural style that has been there historically. So for those people that are familiar with that, I think there's a sense of almost gives a sense of like happiness and calm, that you get to kind of bring back this historical structure. And I think there was a comfort level that Oakland Hills really wasn't, unfortunately had this accident, but they really weren't interested in really changing the aesthetics or the overall feel of the club itself. Do you really want to harken back to your history? And I think for me, that's probably one of the more unique ideas of this project is really enjoying watching a modern day architect create as best as possible with all new, fire safety, all better rated materials. Everything is now going to be up to the highest standard in terms of safety. But to still be able to do that in a way that's so reminiscent of that beautiful historic clubhouse, to me, is a really neat, for lack of a better word, part of this project.
Yeah. And it'll look more like the original building than the building that burned down because that had been modified over the years. Evangelista had redone the clubhouse back in the guess it would have been the mid 1990s. I don't think you weren't here. You were in Birmingham, I think, probably at that point. Right. But there were some other things that really needed to be changed and done. And one of the things that I've always found objectionable that we're finally going to address, and I know the neighbors found objectionable, but you had a 6-foot high cyclone fence with barbed wire on the top of it. And that had been put in there in the 1950s, and that needed to be changed. And everybody appreciates the beauty of Oakland Hills from the interior, but that beauty had to change from the exterior as well, so that when you're driving by it, that's not the impression that you get, and that's not what you see.
Well, that's a good point, actually, Leo, because anytime we're looking at a site plan approval process through anytime a site plan application is submitted, we're going to take that opportunity to not just look at that structure that was lost, but we're actually going to look at the entire property and take opportunities to work with that applicant, which Oakland Hills was great to work with in terms of responsiveness to things that we thought could be improvements or things that could be built upon, as well as addressing maybe some of those issues that they didn't have available to them, such as like interior traffic circulation. My understanding that's going to be an improvement from what it's been historically. The addition of underground tunnels, if you will, to allow for some access of the golf carts through the parking lot is also a safety improvement. So in addition, just the aesthetics of that new building, there's also a lot of internal changes as well as that external view of the fencing and landscaping. That's another thing too, is there's gonna be a tremendous amount of landscaping that's gonna be added once this project's complete. So it's really a comprehensive look of the entire site at all different levels and making sure that not only is it safe, but also it's going to have the standards that an Oakland Hills would expect, as well as what we expect here in Bloomfield Township. So I think the bar has been raised very high, and we will continue to keep it there and look forward to the day when all of those trees are planted and everything's complete.
No, you're absolutely right. From the time you start going by Oakland Hills, you want the look that somebody would expect, and you want the look of what I would expect living in the community, being a member of Oakland Hills, being part of Bloomfield Township here. And that was a hard thing for people internally within members of Oakland Hills, the staff at Oakland Hills. Well, why do we have to do this on the fencing? Why do we have to do this on the landscaping? We're only talking about the building. And now you're really talking about a complete site plan approval. And as site plan approval, it opens up the door for everything. And they said, well, do we really have to do it? And I said, yeah, no, you really don't have to do it. But 6 months from now, when you don't have the approval, because it's part of site plan approval, and then you finally say, okay, I guess we really do have to do it. Let's look at all of the requests from both your department, from the elected officials, from the neighborhood associations, from the general public. Let's see what they're saying. And this is our opportunity as a club and our opportunity as a community to make it better.
Absolutely.
And I think that went a long way because you hear from residents. I've heard from residents time and time again. I think people do expect, even if you're not a member and you may not frequent Oakland Hills, it's such an important landmark that people want to still see that beautification, and it's all encompassed in one thing, and that's really truly what we do, Patty and I, as planners. Like, we really want to think about what is that overall final project. We're thinking big picture, long term. That's sort of the lenses of a planner, and that's sort of what we're doing. I think that Oakland Hills is a great example of that.
And this is really a commercial operation within a residential structure, and technically it is zoned residential. And that was another thing that your department had to contend with, that the standards that you utilize are the residential standards, but the buildings themselves are commercial in nature and have to function as commercial operations, have to have the safety features as commercial operations. So how do we blend those two together, which really makes it unique?
When we were talking about how, for example, there was a building that was converted to your lifestyle building. The First Tee building was converted to lifestyle building, and then how was that going to be adapted so that it looked like the new country club? Well, that was also function, because that was where all of the receiving was occurring. Well, then how do you then screen from the public that back door kind of
The receiving
operation?
area.
Yeah, and so adding the retaining walls and the screening that Andrea was speaking of, so that it functioned well, but also it was screened properly, which is very important to the township from a commercial aspect to residential areas. And but then beyond that, it was what happens internally that's an improvement, and you have that internal service drive that really is going to be beneficial with your valet parking area, again, improving the services and the operations of the department, and that even leads to your greens and grounds building. So, those innovations, or at least improvements to the property, I think made sense to anyone that was participating in that site plan review process, that this really was an opportune time, and there was an advantage that was taken to do that.
And when you have all that going on, now you have to bring so much of it up to today's standards. The stormwater detention, retention, where's it going to go? So we've got that going underneath the main parking lot into the driving range area. You have the green and grounds building, and that's all being moved. Those buildings were built in the 1960s as well. Mm-hmm. And you had the storage of fertilizer. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of things going on there that were definitely not up to standards there in terms of air quality control, fire suppression, all of those things that needed to be addressed. But then once you start to address it and move it into an area, now you've got to reroute you've got the major Lutz drain there, mm-hmm. and all of that you never think about why things don't go wrong until they go wrong. And they don't go wrong is because you plan for it ahead of time, and that's exactly between the engineering department and you're kind of like the band leader of it, because the fire department brings it back to you. Right. The engineering, water and sewer, they bring it back to you. You review it, you disseminate it to the different consultants out there, and then bring it all back and say, okay, we're still looking for this, we're still looking for that, and we're still looking for that. But one of the best things you did, and they, both the architect and the construction company, Clark Construction, said they've never had this happen, is the weekly meetings with your staff, just saying, okay, here's what's on our agenda this week. Tell us what's on your agenda. We want to make sure that we can address this ahead of time so that everything can keep going smoothly.
Well, as you were referring to, just talking about these teams, but there has to be a coordination of the teams. And so our building official, Chris Fox, suggested, let's have those weekly meetings, because there's a whole contingent on the construction side that is expecting to move along and progress, But unless there's coordination and information that's being shared, there could be a disconnect. And knowing that this is such an important project and the timing of it is, it has to be pretty tight in construction phasing, that we need to have that constant communication. So, to his credit, that's been working really well. And even with an additional inspector who is partnering with Chris, George Kilpatrick, that those two are keeping communication lines flowing really well.
In fact, I've been in meetings where they've just kind of said in amazement, we've never had the municipality call us saying, we're looking for this, or our expectations are here. Normally, we don't get approved, and then we're told. They're being proactive, they're getting out in front of it. And when you think about that Oakland Hills over the next 25 years, they're going to have 2 U.S. Opens, 2 Women Opens, and the most current or most recent tournament that's coming up is the USGA, again, junior, in July and August, I think, mid-July. And that's an international tournament. It's not to the size of the other ones, but
It'll be a good test run.
well, it'll be a good, but more importantly, and I say we as part of Bloomfield Township, we need to ensure that everybody is safe, and that there are no hiccups there. And this is going to be a partial construction site going on. We talked about the tunneling that's going on there, and it's actually, the tunneling is 2 aspects of it. One is for all the deliveries, so you no longer have delivery trucks going through the parking lot, as well as another tunnel for the carts. Well, by the time that this tournament starts in July, that all has to be built in, covered over. And I think I just told you earlier that the precast for the tunnels are being installed starting today and should be done by the end of the week. And
I got to see a picture of the tunnel that was being carved out by our building official that was out there. He was doing some photographs and talking to some of our staff from cable to kind of give a site view of what was occurring. And that was very interesting to me, just seeing all the work that's being done currently on site is pretty impressive. And based on just the timing, I think is a big factor. And that's why those weekly meetings are so important. Because like you said, there's an ongoing communication to make sure that our staff, as well as the team that Oakland Hills has hired, are working succinctly, to accomplish this common goal. And I will say it has really helped keep things going, and has been a very positive working relationship.
And on top of Oakland Hills, you don't have anything else going on in the building department, do you?
No.
This is it. This is all we focus
I
on.
mean, you have to be so busy. I know that in my private business, I am so busy in new construction, everything. You have to be just swamped down in your department. So you have your normal course of business, and then you throw this on top of it.
Well, and that helps with Andrea and I work as a terrific team together with the planning division operations, but then overseeing the rest of the coordination of building an ordinance. So it's not just focusing on planning; it's also making sure we have that connectivity with the building operations and ordinance operations. So yes, it is adding to that workload, but at the same time, that is what our department has been doing for the last almost 22 years now, So I think we have a pretty good operation.
You haven't been here that long, have you?
Yes.
Okay.
It will be in August. It will be in August, yeah.
So to give you what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, as I said, the precast for the tunnels are going in. All the slabs there had been poured and cured over the last couple of weeks. But sometime this week, there's 2 cranes on site. Right now, there'll be a third one. The third one will be for the steel. So now they're going to be going vertical. And in the next 60 days, you'll see the skeleton of the structure there. So it is really, really coming along.
That's neat.
So think about that type of construction activity, but then there's events. And so again, we're going to be making sure that anytime there's like the junior championship, that there is a safe ingress and egress of the public to the locations that the public has access to. But there's also going to be areas that are going to be totally screened off as well, and fenced off and separated from, because again, it's going to be safety.
Exactly.
I also have to say, I think part of the reason why this has been so successful in terms of all the things that we look at is the great relationship that we have with our internal departments. I mean, we work very close with engineering, with fire. We're always engaged with our various departments through all projects. So it's not like it's anything new for us to sit down and have this ongoing discussion and I think we all have this higher awareness of this huge project and just making sure that we are all keeping our conversations and that we're keeping current on everything. And I think that's just been a good testimony, I think, to all of our staff here at Bloomfield Township. I mean, they're great.
They really are, and having worked internally with all the departments, and having worked internally with you, and externally now with my involvement with Oakland Hills, it has been just a very, very great relationship. And really, in closing, I just want to say that on behalf of Oakland Hills and all the staff, all of the members there, I want to thank you very, very much for all that you have been doing and will continue to do, because without your cooperation, your involvement, we could be 2 years down the road before. It wouldn't be unusual to just be getting the permits now a year
That's correct.
later.
Yep.
And it's just because of the cooperation, understanding what needs to be done, and making sure that everybody does it. It's really worked well, and we really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
We are not going to stand between anybody in a game of golf. So we will do all we can.
I like that.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be the motto down in the building department. Anything else you guys would like to add before we sign off?
And this is a nice opportunity just to share our involvement with the process that Oakland Hills is going through right now, and we have several more years to come. Involvement, but. Thank you for this opportunity.
And I mean it. Thank you, because it's been, you've made it so easy, and nobody really realizes the behind the scene things that need to be done in order to get to where we are. So on behalf of Oakland Hills, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.